Good evening. I'm Erin Keys, the Executive Director of the Greenwich Center for Hope and Renewal, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our presentation, Sacred Resilience. This evening, we invite you to be part of a conversation between journalist, author, and empowerment advocate Gretchen Carlson and therapist, trainer, speaker, and author George Fowler. In their lives and work, Gretchen and George have learned a great deal about what it means to be resilient and how it is possible to cultivate resilience in the midst of challenging times. It is our hope that this conversation will provide insight and inspiration for you to do just that in your own life. This past year, the COVID pandemic has not only upended life as we used to know it, but it has also created one of the greatest mental health crises of our lifetime, as people struggle with the stress, anxiety, fear, and depression that prolonged isolation, rising health concerns, job loss, and the new demands of working and learning from home bring. At the Center for Hope and Renewal, we are striving to meet this increased demand for our services by providing therapy via telehealth and by raising funds to help offset the cost of therapy for those who otherwise could not afford it. This evening, you will have the opportunity to learn more about who we are at the Center for Hope and Renewal and how you can support our work. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy our program.
The Center for Hope and Renewal is a nonprofit that was founded with the belief that all people deserve to have healing and hope in their lives. And so we have a team of highly qualified therapists that work with individuals, couples, and families to transform their lives and their relationships.
Therapy is bringing to light those things we tend to hide from the world and from ourselves, so that in bringing them to light, they can be healed.
We specialize in everything from working with trauma to depression, anxiety, marital problems, kids acting out problems, eating disorders, substance abuse, you name it. We're areas where people struggle. We want to meet them where they're at.
As a therapist, I've witnessed firsthand the transformation that can take place as a result of the work that we do at the Greenwich Center for Hope and Renewal. Whether it be an individual who turns their lives around, or a couple that comes in to save their marriage, or a family who learns to build stronger bonds with one another. The Center's mission is to transform lives and relationships so that all people who come to us have the opportunity to experience healing and hope.
Well, healing takes many different forms. So traditionally, it's usually one-on-one, a therapist and a client. But certainly we do serve couples, so we'll have, the partners come in, they'll meet with a therapist. We also do groups, whether it be couples or small groups who are looking to work on a particular issue. It might be, addiction recovery, it might be trauma recovery, it might be working on boundaries in relationships, parenting. We offer all of those things.
So the idea is play is their language, so the toys are their words. And I invite them into this place, and it's a safe place, and they're able to do what they need to do to heal.
What makes Greenwich Center unique, why we were particularly attracted, is the faith element that is sort of woven into the fabric of the center.
The center was founded in faith, and faith continues to be the reason why we do what we do. Because we believe God wants all people to have life abundant. We do our part in bringing that about by offering high-quality mental health care.
I think the staff is extremely approachable. I could see sitting down with any of them and having a conversation and feeling like it was a safe, good, confidential space in which to open up and share.
The center is a communal resource. I'm very active in the interfaith arena. I think being a faith-based counseling service is wonderful, that it's reaching out, bringing God's light into the world, but in a way that everyone can access it.
Donations matter because we are a nonprofit, and one of our goals is to make therapy as accessible to people as possible. A lot of people can't afford therapy, and it's just a reality that they face. You know, coming every week to meet with someone can become very expensive. And so what we try to do as much as we can is offset the cost of that therapy by providing financial assistance to anyone who qualifies as being in need.
I do what I do because I want to be part of something bigger than myself. And a job like this really can be so meaningful because I get to be front row center of some of the most dramatic transformation that you're ever going to see.
It's just a thrill to walk alongside people, children and adults, and see their lives transform.
Exploring yourself, your thoughts, your beliefs, how you feel about things, your emotions, is really elemental to every person to thrive.
Hi, my name is Veronica. I am 26 years old, and I started coming to the center in late 2016 after my first and only suicide attempt. I was coming out of the hospital at the time, and my local church actually referred me to the center. And prior to that, I had seen 7 local therapists where it just wasn't quite the right fit. I had an awesome relationship with my college counselor, who I adored, and just wasn't sure if I could find that same fit somewhere else. I got paired up with Julie, and to me the difference was she really found a way to just sit with me in my grief. Even times when I was bawling my eyes out on her couch, she found ways to just sit and be with me, and just to be still and really process that grief. Tears that had been just kept and held inside for so many years. I was able to share with her things that I had never shared or spoken about in my adult life. Severe sexual child abuse that had happened to me as a young child. And just walking me through the ways that God just absolutely adores me as his loving daughter. And Julie was able to get to me in a place where I so desperately needed to be loved and pushed towards the Father's love. I really, truly believe that God used Julie as a vessel of healing to get to me. At that time, I was really angry with God and just wondering why I was in the grips of such a dark depression, and was so mad at myself for not being able just to get out of bed and go to work and do the things that I once really enjoyed and loved doing. I could no longer do. And week by week, Julie really sat with me in my pain while also gently pushing me into the arms of the Father and reminding me of how loved, how deeply, deeply loved by God I was. And that was something that was so missing in any counseling session I had ever gone to previously. I can honestly sit here and say that the center truly, truly saved my life. And I am so grateful for the amazing clinicians that they have there. I was able to do so much healing there, and I still do. I'm still a client of theirs, and I just want to say that I am eternally indebted to the work that the center has done in my life and has just reframed my thoughts and gotten me of a place of acceptance, but also so much growth after that. Julie was able to bring in my boyfriend at the time, now my fiance, and she has just truly seen just the full circle of God's fingerprint and his handprint all over my story, and she's bared witness to that. And I am just, again, so grateful for her and the amazing staff that they have over there at the center. I am forever in debt to them, and I am so grateful to be alive, but also grateful to be speaking today with you and sharing my testimony. And I just want to say that God can take any broken pieces and not only make them whole again, but get them to a place of redemption and wholeness that wasn't there before. So I am so grateful for the center, and all I could say is thank you. Thank you. It saved my life.
At the Center for Hope and Renewal, our mission is simple: to transform lives and relationships through clinically excellent counseling. To that end, we seek to facilitate for our clients and our community the growth and healing needed to create that transformation. Few welcome times of stress and challenge in their lives, but as you will hear from our speakers in just a moment, it is often those times of stress and challenge that prove to be the most defining in our lives, if we can use them as tools to make us stronger and more resilient. So let's turn the conversation over now to George and Gretchen, as we learn from them how to turn stress into something that is not only positive, but possibly even sacred.
Well, George, thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this discussion, because I think it's really going to help so many people, and especially your own personal story, because it's not like you ever thought you were really going to be a therapist.
No.
So how did it all happen?
It's a big story there. So I guess we go to the beginning. I was the fifth of 8 kids in a blue-collar town that was lots of fighting, and I guess I was always in a role of peacemaker, and I didn't even know there was such thing as a therapist in the town I grew up in. And at 21, I was a police officer, and I started responding to all these disputes and fights, and I was horrified and fascinated. Because I was like, what is going on here? Like, why do people do this? Why do they get in a relationship? Why do they get out of a relationship? I was just really, some part of me just felt called in that direction. So that's where I started to go back to school and study psychology and start trying to figure this problem out.
But it was really 9/11
Right.
that really changed the course of your life, and so many other people's, of course. I feel this connection to you about that because I was working for CBS News at the time and spent months down at the rubble myself, in a different capacity as a journalist.
Right.
But I understand how much emotion could be built up in that experience and how it was life-changing for so many people.
Right.
So what did it do to you?
In God's timing, I just finished my graduate program. And I thought, maybe in 20 years when I retire, I'll have a second career, something to do. And 9/11 happened. It was like the whole world turned upside down. The New York City Fire Department lost 343 firefighters, which to date is the largest loss of emergency personnel in one moment in the history of the world. So I was called down and arrived at ground zero right after the second tower collapsed. And it was a scene like nothing I've ever seen before. It was like being on another planet, just with the smell and the fire and the dust. And it's just a blur. It was months of doing that. But there was a call for help because we were seeing all these issues, people drinking, violence, post-traumatic stress, all these different issues, depression, and they wanted people to help out. And that's when a gong went off in my head. I'm like, wait a second, I do have training in this. No part of me wants to talk to firefighters about their feelings, and yet there's a need here. Somebody's got to step up. So on my days off, I said, you know what, I'll try it. I'll see some couples. And that first day I showed up, 10 couples in my office, and I was like, whoa, this is some rough stuff.
Mm-hmm. But I'd love to hear more from you about how your own upbringing and then actually being in the police department and within, with firefighters, and how this wasn't commonplace for them to open up.
Right.
So what did you do to make that happen?
Well, there's a saying in the firehouse, whatever you see here stays here. And there's a lot of training to turn off your feelings. I mean, to run towards bullets or run towards a fire, you have to, suppress your fear. And you want to be able to do that. But there's so much training to not be vulnerable, to not express your feelings, that, when moments like 9/11 happen anybody would feel anxious, you really have no way of being able to talk about that. So you wind up hiding these places in yourself. And the research is really clear that the more we try to suppress and cut off parts of ourselves, the lower our levels of engagement are in life. So that's what started happening to me. I'd come home, I wouldn't talk to my wife. My wife would try to protect me. She didn't know how to talk to me. And before you know it, the distance in our relationship really started to increase. You know, so it was a counterintuitive move, but I said to myself, I got to figure out how to talk about these things instead of just kind of keeping them to myself. And that work that I did with me and my wife really kind of took off this excitement in how can I help other people do the same thing.
I read about that in your book, and it was so brave of you to be vulnerable, you know, and talk about that, which I think is what makes people feel relatable to you and be able to share with you what they're going through. So what did it feel like to start helping people?
Well, first of all, that word vulnerability, especially men don't like it. So I try not even to use it because it's such a stretch. It's like there's so much training not to do that. And somebody says, just be vulnerable. It's like, I don't want to be vulnerable. But I think that when people start to have success, when they start to recognize we're designed to not be alone with these emotions, once they learn how to let themselves in first and let their partner in, that leads to connection. That's the beauty of this process, that if you just let your emotions speak, it will tell you what you need, and you wind up experiencing feeling something very different.
So now all these years later, it's not just firefighters that you're helping.
Right.
It's regular folk who aren't running into burning buildings. How is it the same and how is that different?
I mean, the good news, we all have the same needs in the same way we protect ourselves when those needs are not being met. So in the big picture, it's all the same stuff. There's a little bit different types of protection, different awareness, but it's amazing as a society. We're becoming more and more disconnected. And to protect ourselves from the disconnection, we're more distracted with stuff, and our relationships are struggling more and more. So, you know, really helping people just have a wake-up call and start kind of turning around and going back to what we're designed to do.
So what was the genesis for your book, Sacred Stress?
It was really just trying to get a story out there. Even when people hear the word stress, they think about, bad, reduce it, work out, eat right. They don't see the opportunity in stress. And there's actually, the research talks about two types of stress. There's distress, which is more negative stress, and eustress, which is more positive stress. Nobody even recognizes the positive stress, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for stress. There's something really healthy. If people learn how to embrace it, it enriches their lives. If you think about all the things that you've accomplished, right? Stress was a huge part of that. So we're really trying to help people befriend stress, to recognize, you know, yes, it can be too much, and then we have to find ways of mitigating that. But for the most part, if you learn to embrace it, it changes the dynamics.
It's interesting to hear you say that because, you know, I have had a lot of stress in my life.
Right.
But early on, my mom used to say to me, I think you perform better under stress. And have you ever heard anyone say that? And what do you think that means when you look at stress in a more positive way? That
you are embracing what stress, when it's in your window of tolerance, we call it, it brings out the best in you. You're more focused. Your senses are more alive. Your levels of engagement. The key to any relationship is based on the levels of engagement. When they're high, that relationship is doing well, or that performance is doing well, right? When it gets too much, then it goes in the other direction. So the most successful people who thrive under stress do exactly what you're doing. They see the opportunity in the stress, not just the worry or the fear or trying to, if you say you're stressed out, your body's already feeling the negativity of stress. If you just change that word and I have an opportunity in this interview to kind of do something cool, you can feel your body starting to lighten up a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because we hear in the news all the time that when you get stressed, your body produces cortisol, and that's a negative thing, and it can lead to heart disease and a bunch of other ailments. So what do you say to that?
All of the media is constantly talking about dealing with stress what we call self-regulating or self-soothing on your own. Work out, eat right, sleep right, do meditation, and they're all helpful. But we're not talking about the most effective way of handling stress is what we call co-regulation. It's actually being in relationship with somebody else and talking about it that allows another nervous system to join you and work together to reduce that stress. So that's really what we're encouraging, to see the opportunity that stress is often a doorway to strengthen connections for people who know how to take that.
And then you add the word sacred to it.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, I keep going back to that's how we're designed. That's the beauty. When do science and religion, regardless of the tradition, agree? And they all talk about the redemptive value of trying and failing and the rebirth that happens, right? So when you start to see stress that way, the worst case scenario, even when you fail, you learn something about that process that allows you to grow from it, right? Organisms that don't experience stress, do you know what happens to them?
They die?
They die. I mean, so people who try and live a stress-free life, right? They're not seizing life in the way that God wants them to. So it's really about learning how to befriend that stress.
So I should stop dreaming about that beach that I long to go to and do nothing?
No, it's always good to reset and get a break. That's part of recharging, and that's healthy. But you can't live on that beach. Life would be pretty boring, right? Before you know it, that beach turns into Castaway, and you're trapped, and all of a sudden you're disconnected. So
and
how
you're
do we
talking
find
to a
out
soccer ball.
But Wilson.
So how has this become magnified during the pandemic?
I think that is what's so heartbreaking. We are designed to deal with stress in relationship, and we've never been so disconnected as we are now. We are already as a society heading towards disconnection. Our houses are getting bigger, our families are getting smaller, our friends are becoming less. And yet you throw this pandemic in and people are literally alone in their houses day after day. Kids are not going to school. I mean, across the board, the anxiety levels and the depression levels are through the roof.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you've seen that play out in the people that you're talking to now.
Absolutely. I think any therapist I talk to will say they've never been busy and they've never seen this much distress.
Mm-hmm. How does resiliency come into all of this?
Resiliency, the beauty of resiliency is again, people seeing the opportunity. That we hear a lot about post-traumatic stress, but we don't hear a lot about post-traumatic growth. And yet more people grow from trauma than actually experience PTSD. So what are those common elements that they find, right? They see something in what's happening that they want to change. Their life changes with more meaning. They might have more gratitude. They might be more spiritual. Like they take their relationships more seriously. So that's what I'm hoping for people in the pandemic, that they're not trying to get back to life before, that there's a new normal that they're going to find, that this process has changed them for the better.
That's such an optimistic way of looking at it.
Right.
Because you hear people say, like, there's either going to be a whole bunch of babies born or a lot of divorce. Right?
You had the honeymoon the first couple of months of the pandemic. People are doing great and enjoying their partner, but this year has been a long time, and there are a lot of, unfortunately, couples getting divorced because they don't know how to have these conversations that bridge the distance that's grown between them.
Mm-hmm. So what advice do you give to people as they're trying to find the true meaning of the positive side of stress and also resiliency?
Just to appreciate how they're protecting themselves. People either put up a wall and try to get away, or they get angry and they try to change their partner, right? And both of those moves are trying to just deal with that emotion. What we're encouraging people listening is head towards your partner. Learn how to let them into kind of these feelings, because all emotions are their signal. They're telling you what you need, right? But if it's covered up in anger, or if it's covered up with a wall, you don't really get what you need. And then it's harder and harder to trust the person, even though you love them. And sadly, that's what's happening. And that's the good news. There's a way of doing that differently. There's a way of turning towards your partner with this that actually can strengthen your bond instead of weakening it.
So what is the role of faith in cultivating, becoming a better person that understands stress and resiliency?
I think Jesus gave us a beautiful example of handling stress well. He knew how to do well in relationships. He knew how to express himself. He can flip over tables and dance and cry and laugh. I mean, he had a whole range of emotions. He lived life well. He knew how to go into the desert and have solitude. So I think it's a great template for all of us on how to not try to live a life avoiding stress, but to head towards the stress, see the opportunity in it. And I think about my prayer life, and it's usually in times of struggle that I turn towards God the most. So again, there's that template, that head towards people. Don't head towards yourself or hiding in a room. Like in prayer, it's just trying to find that connection. So I think 9/11 and these events that I've experienced and the stories I've listened to, I'm sure the stories you've listened to all the years of people, it's in these moments of need that you really feel the strong. It's one thing to be loved when you're killing it and you're doing well. It's another thing when you're down and you're struggling and people come closer. And I think when you experience that, that's a love that's the strongest thing on this planet.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that and for being vulnerable. And I know that you serve as a great role model, especially to other men who can see that it's okay to do that.
And you still can be strong and take care of business, right? It's about flexibility.
No, it is. But I think it's really important to, I've tried to do that in raising my son, is not shut down his emotions, but let him know that it's okay to hug me every morning.
That's right. We need that hug. They need it too, so.
Yes, exactly. So, George, a lot of people are adverse to going to a therapist.
Right.
So how do you get people to get to the other side?
Well, it's like anything, the hardest thing is making the phone call at a first awkward moment when you're sitting down. But a therapist is trained to be non-judgmental. Really, they're not responsible for the outcome, but the process, to open up space, just so you can get curious and get to know yourself better. So normally in a relationship, one person's a little bit more motivated than the other, right? But for that person who's reluctant to just say, what do you have to lose? I mean, the worst thing that happens, you waste an hour and you never come back, right? But at the end of the day, it could make all the difference in just helping you. Like, you don't develop a great golf swing the first time. I mean, we need reps at these conversations, and I think that's what's missing. A lot of us don't grow up in families where we see this, so it gets role model to us, and we think that is the reality. But the good news is we have a native language underneath that if people just help us find our words, that beautiful process of connection starts to unfold. So, Gretchen, you have an amazing story and lots of lessons learned throughout all your experiences. I guess I'm curious, if you think about your story with resilience, what would you have to offer about how resilience has really played a big part of your life?
Well, thanks for the question. I think first and foremost, for parents who may be listening and raising kids, it's really important to encourage them to stand up and speak up and have their voice heard. Right. I know I heard that growing up, and it played a big role in me finding courage to do many different things in my life, not just the most recent big thing that I did. Right. So I think it's really important to parent in that way and let young people know that their one voice matters. And my life has worked in really mysterious ways, which is another great lesson for young people, middle-aged people, older people, because sometimes we get stuck in a rut and we think that my life isn't meaningful or I'm not doing what I intended to do. And, listen, I never intended to become one of the poster people for sexual harassment in the workplace. That's not something you aspire to or, think one day I want that on my resume.
Right.
But the one constant in my life has been that if there's a challenge in front of me, I go for it. And that's the way I was raised, through my faith and through the foundation of living my life to the fullest. And so that's what I did. Now, I'm not saying it was easy.
Right.
Because it was not. And it's like courage and resiliency are similar in the sense that it's not like walking into a room and turning on a light switch and having it be that easy, right? It's something that you think about for a long time before you actually make a difficult move.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to come forward with a harassment lawsuit like that against one of the most powerful people in the world was truly a David and Goliath moment.
Certainly.
And, you know, I basically had the slingshot and the rock, and he pretty much had everything else. So it took immense courage and bravery. But, you know, I thank God every day for the resiliency of my family, my husband, my parents, who I'm still blessed to have in my life, my 2 children, who were my paramount concern at the time and still to this day. And, you know, that was pretty much it, because it's not like you could go shout out on the mountaintop what you were about to do.
Right.
So I think that other challenges in my life have led me to a place where I suddenly became at peace with what I was going to do.
Wow.
And, you know, somebody said to me after I filed the lawsuit, something good is going to come out of this. You just can't see it yet. And at the time, I wrote it down and I saved it. And I thought, I'm not sure this is true. And I just recently came upon it again, and it's 4.5 years later, and I realized how true that statement was. But it's what I made of it. You know, coming through it on the other side without having any idea how any of this was going to turn out. That something great did come of it. A lot of good things came out of it, through the pain and through the shame and through the agony, and was that I've seen the resilience travel through to my children, the courage travel through to them. I've seen it travel to thousands of women and men across our country and the world. I've surprised myself in going to Capitol Hill and trying to pass legislation to make the workplace safer for everyone. So a lot of good has come out of this. A cultural revolution has come out of this. And so I'm thankful every day that people may look to me as inspiration if they're going through a tough time, and they feel, I think, through me that their voice is also being heard.
Yeah, I want to highlight that moment where you said, you wrote it down, that something good would come of this. It's okay not to see it while it's happening, but at some point, can you see God's fingerprints on your story to shape it in a way that you can't even imagine?
Yeah, it actually happened before I found the courage to come forward, because about 6 months beforehand, my parents, who were very hesitant about me doing something like this. I'm from Minnesota, where everyone's nice to everyone, and people don't really sue people that much. And they finally called me together on the phone one night, and they were both very emotional. And they said, "We understand that you have to do this, and we're with you." And, you know, no matter how old you are in your life, you still want the blessing of your parents.
Absolutely.
And so that was huge for me, and it was one of the big ways in which, you know, it sort of put me over the edge.
Yeah.
And the other thing was actually meeting with Erin and, you know, being able to express to her what I was about to do, which was huge because I couldn't hardly tell anyone.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have faith be a part of my decision-making process. And, you know, she was incredibly helpful in just listening to me. And it's something I'll never forget. You know, the advice that she gave me and praying with me and telling me my grandfather, who was a minister, was looking down on me and knows that I was making the right decision. And yeah, I mean, it really, you know, was one of the most significant moments.
Thank you for sharing that. You can see how the body speaks, right? And it remembers how profound that moment was.
Yeah. Fortunately and unfortunately, there were a lot of those profound moments.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing I would say about resiliency is that this whole experience, I mean, I always felt like I was a strong person, but this whole experience really made me realize that I'm a strong person.
That's right.
Because it was such a solitary event. And even though I had my family around me, it was really up to me to do this. And after I filed the lawsuit, the good and the bad was that we were planning to go on a family vacation to California. And obviously I couldn't go anymore. And I said to my husband, I think it's a really good idea if you still go and take the kids away from this. Mm-hmm. So the really great thing was that the kids didn't witness the first week of the hell that I was going through. But the really bad thing was I was all by myself. And so I think it's really significant to talk about that because in the end, that made me even stronger, but it was really difficult to go through. And if I didn't have the rock and foundation in my life of my faith, I don't know what I would have done. So, if people are ever feeling alone in big decisions in their lives, I hope that my story can be of inspiration to them, as somebody who's been there and done it, and I get it. I know how tough it is.
I so appreciate that aloneness, that you're willing to share that, because so many people are experiencing that. Right? The shame is they want to hide it. They don't want it to be seen. They want to face it alone, and we don't do well with that. So what would your advice be to people that can't find the courage, that are battling these demons on their own?
Mm-hmm. Well, I always say to people that if you just do one little baby step and you realize that you survive, that the next time you'll take 2 steps. Right. And I think that is that's really important for people to hear, because it can seem like this huge problem is in front of you and you don't really know how to start tackling it, right? But if you can try to break it down into really small little parts and just try one little part and take a risk, and then you see that you're okay, it builds you up for the next day to take a slight more risk. And like I said, turning on courage is not like turning on a light switch. But if you start in the process of building with baby steps, you eventually get there. I also just believe that a support system is essential, to be able to trust somebody else well enough to be able to speak to them about it, and whether that's your partner or your parent or your therapist. Yeah. It's really important to be able to express what's on your mind and what you might be about doing, And that's why for me, being able to go and talk to Erin Keyes was so important, right? Because it made me feel like I wasn't by myself.
It's a great definition of resiliency. Just take a step, right? It's about trying to move. It's about trying to not be so alone. Mm-hmm. And there are so many people out there who just are lost and they don't know what they can do, right? So I so appreciate your story as an inspiration that says, take a step.
The services from the center have really positively impacted my life and my family's life, and just our trajectory moving forward. Last May, we lost my mom really suddenly, and one of the ways that my church supported us was by connecting us with the counseling services at the Greenwich Center for Hope and Renewal. And that was just the start of a really beautiful journey that was really difficult, working through the shock, the grief, the disbelief, the loss of our identity as a family and as individuals. But with that real difficulty of working through all those things, opened us up to the possibilities of the identity that we want to form as a family moving forward. It helped deepen the relationships that we have with each other, helped us develop a stronger sense of self and really being able to tap into just how resilient we are, and really helped us see that instead of turning to anger and staying in that shock and disbelief, it really allowed us to kind of pivot and see that with darkness, there is light, but that you have to be open to seeing the little things and kind of marking the progress and really looking towards whatever the goal is that we've set. And so doing lots of this work together as a family was really beneficial. And I can't even explain to you just really how it has positively influenced our family and helped us get through a really tumultuous time. If I had to choose one word to describe our experience, I would say that it would be one of great awakening. Definitely. Just really exposing us to different ways of thinking about things, being able to really put ourselves in each other's shoes and just look at our lives with a lens of compassion.
The Center for Hope and Renewal was founded by a pastor with the dream of having a place where all people could find healing for their lives. At the center, we are deeply grateful for the support of our faith communities, and this year we have been reminded of just how much our faith leaders have done to care for the spiritual and emotional well-being of so many. This evening, we dedicate our program in honor of these faith leaders, and we say thank you. You have responded to the challenge of this time with grace, strength, creativity, and perseverance. You have been on the front lines of faith during this pandemic, and your preaching, teaching, and care have sustained our hearts and souls. Whether it be in offering outdoor worship, curbside communion, streaming religious services like weddings and funerals, and meeting the members of your faith community over Zoom, you have innovated in ways that none of us could have imagined. Thanks to you, people have had a place to turn to find solace and ongoing connection, and those in your congregation and the wider community are more resilient as a result.
Hi, my name is Drew Williams. I was the senior pastor at Trinity Church in Greenwich and Darien for best part of 10 years. And I recall a very important lunch right at the beginning of my ministry in Greenwich, where I met with a young man called Paul Sorensen, who over a salad introduced me to the goodness of the Center for Hope and Renewal. And I look back on that lunch, and that was so significant and so important, because there began a partnership in the healing love of God for many, many people that came through Trinity's doors. And it was just the most remarkable privilege, the most remarkable gift and resource to be able to refer hurting people from our congregation and those who came across our path to the Center for Hope and Renewal, knowing that they would find in you healing and hope, and have their hearts put back together again, have families put back together again. It was such a glorious thing to be able to send them to you, knowing that they would meet with the healing love of Christ in that place. So I am so grateful to you for those years, but I'm also personally very grateful for you, because during my ministry at Trinity, I got sick for a little while. It went on a bit longer than everyone had anticipated, certainly me. But the other side of that sickness, what of course you learn is that it's not just the person going through the sickness, but if you're sick, your family suffers too. And that was where the Center for Hope and Renewal really stepped forward and helped put us back together again as a family. Both my wife and I, my kids, were just extraordinarily blessed by your team, who just very lovingly restored us in God's healing love, and just kind of walked with us through what was quite a challenging season. And I will always be indebted to you for that. I'm beyond words grateful for what you did for us all in that season. And I guess I just want to finish by saying this. I now have a different role that has given me the care of over 30 churches up and down New England. And I would say to you, not only thank you for your extraordinary ministry in Greenwich and the environment around, I would say to you, I wish there was a Center for Hope and Renewal in every state, from Connecticut to Maine. I I constantly imagine referring folk to you. I can't help but think, oh, this is something the Center for Hope and Renewal could really help with. And I just can imagine so many pastors, ministers out there who would just, there's so many people in need of the care in Christ that you're able to provide. So thank you. Sky's the limits. So may you thrive and grow in Greenwich. And my prayer is that you multiply too. God bless you, and thank you for all that you do.
We hope you have enjoyed our presentation and that from it you have received insight for ways that you can become more resilient in your own life. If you'd like to learn more about the Center for Hope and Renewal, you can find us on our website, hopeandrenewal.org. And if you're interested in working with one of our therapists, please contact us, and we will match you with a therapist who is right for you so you can begin your healing journey as soon as possible. As we go now from this place, this time of learning and reflection, may peace surround you and a spirit of hope uplift you. We have been and will remain in this together. And as we start to see the light at the end of the tunnel and come out on the other side of this pandemic, may each of us find that we are stronger and more resilient as a result. Blessings to you this evening. Thank you for joining us.